Appreciate it. Appreciate being here. So I would just want to say, my wife and I come and we'll go out to eat and we'll say, we're going to say the grace. Is there anything we can pray for you? We ask the server. And one time the server was really honest. He said, well, could you pray that I get some really big tips tonight because I want to take tomorrow off? Well, so he came up to us about 15 minutes later and he said, man, the Lord answered your prayer. I just got a huge tip.
So it does work. Prayer works. God's listening.
Yeah, see?
proven himself. So I want to get into a lot of deep stuff because there's a lot of folks in this room that have no clue what's going on with AI. And I would love to get into that eventually. But I really want to hear your story as a kid, your family, and growing up, and how you ended being that person you are now.
Okay.
We got all the time in the world. Take all the time.
So my father was born in Durango, Mexico. He came to the U.S., became an architect. And so I'm an only child with a bunch of brothers and sisters because my mom was married before and my dad was married before. And then I came along, and then they got divorced, and so I was raised by a single mom, who eventually took a job with Mutual of New York Life Insurance, and we moved to California for a while, and then Pittsburgh for a while, and then she got transferred to New York City, so we lived outside of Philadelphia for a while, and so it was kind of it wasn't the formula for success that you might. It's certainly not the story I would have written. But God never writes stories, praise him. He doesn't write stories like I would. But, I wouldn't have David, kill his buddy, But anyway, so that was, growing up without a dad and my mom. But my grandmother lived with us. And my grandmother she would often say, this is one that went to the other school that I won't mention. But she would say, you can do anything you want. And she had a series of books that were pretty old called the Book of Knowledge. And she would always, anytime we had extra time, she would say, go find a book. They were blue. She said, go get one of the blue books and just read it. And so I was kind of right or wrong, filled with this notion that you can do anything. and so that was kind of, I think, laid the foundation for trying stuff.
Just absorbing knowledge.
Right.
And okay.
Lifelong learning.
So you eventually go to UTA,
right?
Engineering.
Yes.
Focused in that. And then you end up, how do you make a switch from engineering to finance? That was kind of a strange.
Oh, yeah. So I went to UTA, study engineering, and I got a job with a little company in Dallas called Dan Ray that was building telephone equipment. And this was in the day when some of y'all are old enough to remember the Bell system. And the Bell system.
The Bell system?
The Bell system ran all of the...
Yes.
Well, this was before baby bells. This was AT&T ran all the telephones in the country. And they made the mistake of making a Texan angry. So a fellow named Tom Carter, who they sued because he had a thing that let ranchers and oilmen who were out in the field call their office, and the secretary could hang the phone up into what's called an acoustic coupler, and they could talk on their radio to somebody on the phone. And so AT&T sued him, and being a typical Texan, he went to Dallas and found the meanest law firm he could, and he said, if you win this lawsuit, you can have the company. And they won the lawsuit and broke up Bell. So when that happened, when Bell broke up, I was working for this little company in North Dallas, and all of a sudden we got flooded in orders for these telephone switches that they were building. And so I kind of might have left school before graduating. and because we got
students in the room, do not take note of that.
Again, not
finish.
That's not the money shot. That's the, anyway, so I got real busy, learned to program in C and doing all this kind of crazy programming, and eventually started my own company doing software development. When the baby bells broke up, they needed a lot of network modeling for what they were doing. So I started a company and we did network modeling. And a friend of mine called, and he was a software job shopper. He would get contracts, and he called and he said, "So Dowell, I've got a finance company that needs a model written, and you're a model, you write models. So would you be interested?" And I said, "Well, no, that sounds terribly boring." And finance, how can finance be fascinating? So he said, "Well, it's for the Bass family in Fort Worth, and if you're from Fort Worth, you know the Bass family. They rescued Disney, so maybe you don't know that, and most recently rescued Bluebell."
Standing ovation. Do we want to do that?
That's right.
Good.
Sid Bass said that he's gotten more recognition for saving Bluebell than what he did with Disney. He actually had an aside story. He had a UPS delivery to his place in New York, and the UPS driver wrote on the package, "Thank you, Mr. Bass, for saving Bluebell." But anyway, so it was for the Bass family, and I'd heard of them, and I said, "Well, sure, I'll go take the meeting." So I went and met with them, and they'd done some trades, and they'd done billions of dollars of trades, rate swaps. So, and they were real quick. It was Italian. The country of Italy had a high withholding tax on their bonds. And so they had to they had to pay a higher coupon to sell their bonds than companies were paying to borrow money. So for a G8 country to do that, that's a problem. So what they were doing is they were buying, and the Basses knew how to get the withholding tax back. So they would buy the bonds and sell the swap. And so it's great. So for the finance people,
everybody who understands that, raise your hand.
Yeah. Well,
they're making lots of money, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And,
okay.
A positive carry trade that the idea is that at some point Italy's going to realize this is stupid and take the withholding tax away. And at that point, their bonds become super valuable. And so it's a positive carry trade that has the potential for making a great deal of money. But there's no closed-in formula for valuing rate swaps. So they needed this model. So they explained all this to me, and I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so I went home, and I thought, telling people, I got to go into the towers. And I got a call about 2 weeks later, and they said, "Well, nobody we've talked to knows what we're talking about, so we'll take a risk with you." And they sent me up to New York to meet with the guys at Merrill and Goldman. And I like I said earlier, I bought a copy of Fabozzi's book on fixed income to read on the way up to to New York, and it helped me sleep while I was up there, and learned about defees and cash flows and all this, and I wrote the model for them, and it took a number of months to get that, and then integrated into their portfolio management system, and toward the end of it. This was great staging. I got a call from Tommy Taylor, used to run the investment arm for the Basses. I got a call from Tommy's secretary, and he said, "Well, Tommy wants to meet with you when you're in New York." And this is my last trip up to New York. The project was pretty well finished. And she said, he wants to meet with you at he kept an apartment at the St. Regis. And so he wants to meet you in his office. And I thought, I even called my wife and said, "Well, he's probably going to offer me a job, but I've got my own company. I don't really want to do that." And so I went up there, and let's say Regis is a really nice hotel. And he kept an apartment there. So this is all the setup. It was great. And so I get there, and he had an office there in his apartment, and we're talking. He said, "Well, I was talking to Sid." And well, first of all, to keep in mind, this was 38 years ago. So there wasn't a lot of technology. Literally, most trading floors had a chain drive that when you wrote your ticket, you put it on the chain drive, took it to the back office. So technology was not so prevalent in trading back then. And Tommy said, "Well, I was talking to Sid, and he really thinks there's going to be a whole lot more of this kind of technology in the trading and the investment field. And so we want to offer you a job to come work on the trading desk and do more of this kind of work." And he literally slid a piece of paper across the desk. And I looked at it and said, "Okay, I'll do that." I had no idea that any kind of job would pay something. And then it was about 6 months later, he told me there's a bonus, which was bigger than, anyway, that's another day's. It's a whole different world, but anyway, so that's, and I called my wife coming, like right after that, I called her and I said, "Man, I'm sorry, but normally we talk about these things, but I accepted the job." And she went, "Yay!" That's when I found out she hated being self-employed. And so, anyway, so that's how I made the shift. Yeah.
So, and you started work for the Bass Brothers, and online, internet, everything goes crazy. And I'm assuming you're going from engineering to finance to programming, but all this is happening at work. But you also have a family.
Yes, yeah, we have 6 children.
So tell us about that.
It's well, so I should say, so I was raised Methodist. My wife was raised Catholic, and at no fault of either church, we heard the gospel. And when we did, we realized that there's something better, there's something greater than us, and and as you know, there's a transition where you have to, you start realizing, like, Jesus just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then there was this point which I alluded to earlier this morning where I'd heard enough about Jesus, and then I had this event happen where I literally should have died.
Okay, you didn't tell the students about dying. You want to tell a little bit more?
See, that's what everybody says. But that's when you say, do you have a story like that?
Yes, I almost drowned, but I don't want to talk about that because I want to hear your story.
So that's for y'all that weren't there. That's a little thing that I'm on the board of an organization called E3 Partners. We do the I Am Second films, if you've ever seen those, and we train people for in evangelism. And one of the things is this 15-second testimony. But I'll tell you, since you asked, I was flying a plane over Arkansas. And it was a little Cessna 172, and we got pulled into a thunderstorm. And thunderstorms and small planes, there's no match. And I thought it was going to rip the wings off the plane. It was so bad. And literally, there's kind of no way out. And that's when I prayed. I said, "Well, Lord, I guess I'm dead, so I might as well give my life to you."
You said that was the lamest prayer that could be prayed in chapel. It's not a lame prayer. It was out of desperation.
It was out of desperation, but it's kind of like, okay, the last crumb I'll give to you. But he heard the prayer, and literally the storm cell kind of spit us out, and I was able to call the flight service station. I get IFR approach into El Dorado, Arkansas, and it happened. And from that moment on, I think a lot about, because I was serious. I gave my life to Jesus. I mean, at that point, but I'm so bad. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, if I mess up from now on, it's your fault.
Yeah, I gave it to you.
I'm such a
should have done something with it.
I know. He loves me anyway, but and he knew me before I knew me, so that's good. But anyway, so that was kind of that, and we at that point we had 2 children, and I remember our third boy came along, and I was thinking, wait a minute, and I was still working in telecom at the time, and I'm thinking, this is really expensive. And a good Christian friend of mine said, God pays for what he orders. And so we thought,
okay, let's pause right there.
Yeah.
He pays for what he orders.
Yeah.
Tell us something deeper about that. What?
Well, we didn't think we could afford a third child, and God supplied. And it doesn't mean we go to irresponsible things, but God makes the babies. And so, and then we had a fourth, and then a fifth, who's over there.
Hey, Rebecca. Raise your hand, Rebecca. She's the best of them all, right, Rebecca?
That's right.
Yes, okay.
And then we had a sixth, who's our Marine. And so now we have 13 grandchildren. Yay. Any grandparents out there? Is it the greatest thing ever? So, yeah, and another thing just along those lines, because when I hope I don't turn anybody away on this. When Beth and I started reading about the tithe, about giving to God, we couldn't afford the tithe. There's no way. And I started thinking about that. God pays for what he orders. He expects us to give back to him. And so so we did. We started and we settled on 10%. debatable or whatever, but we settled on that, and we started doing that, and it's worked out. In fact, it's worked out really.
He pays for what he orders. That's good. That's good. Okay, so you have the Bass Brothers, but today you and I've talked about AI, neural networks, all that. The books I've read, it almost just seems like we're trying to replicate the brain in a machine with neural networks and things like that. But if you can, and I'm reading books, I don't understand them. Bring it down to my level where we can understand kind of the evolution of AI and then eventually where it can land.
Okay, yeah. So most people here probably have used like ChatGPT or Copilot or Grok or one of those. Those are called large language models. So the way a large language model works, it's really just a super fancy probability engine.
Okay, stop. Probability.
Right.
It's not giving you 100% accurate information.
No.
It's the most probable.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you, and just a simple example, if you say Mary had a, right, then there's lots of words that could go next. Dog, cat, headache, right? But the most probable thing is little. Mary had a little. Now, if you have that, the next word, it's a very high probability that the next word is lamb. And so when you put in a prompt or a question into AI, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's very sophisticated and very cool the way they do it. But when you type in a set of words, all it's doing is taking those words, it's turning them into tokens, and there's a number behind those tokens, and there's a probability of what the next set will be. So it's called inference. And so there's an inference engine that runs. The computer doesn't even know the words. It just knows the group of numbers that are associated with the tokens within the words. So it doesn't even know what it's telling you. So they pump the answer through a natural language processor that makes it look like it knows what it's talking about, but it actually doesn't. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It almost sounds like they're playing Family Feud behind the scenes, and the number one answer for this next word is
right.
But you mentioned in Chapel that the accuracy, you can't trust it. You got to know something. And then you also talked about a test that you gave it a test and it's changed the test.
Right.
So explain that. I don't understand that.
Okay. Yeah. So now you have this probability engine that pretends like it is thinking, which it's not. But it's really super helpful. And so you can have it do tasks. If you have an agent, you can have the agent do tasks for you. Now, first of all, we'll talk about the errors. The errors come from the fact that most AI is generally trained. So every nonsense thing that's been said on X, it's trained on. So every bad piece of information in Wikipedia, every silly, story that's on the internet, it's trained on. So there's a probability it's going to land on one of those. And so you have to check everything that comes from AI. But you also have to check the way it's reasoning, because they also fake reasoning. And so I literally use AI every day in my work. And I told them this morning, I actually, in preparation for this morning's talk, I described into ChatGPT and into Grok that it was a chapel service, and here's kind of what I want to talk about. And both of them came up with speeches. And I said 15-minute speech, and they came up with 15-minute speeches. So then I copied and pasted the Grok speech into chat and the chat speech into Grok, and had them arguing back and forth about what was better. And then I didn't use any of it because it was all pretty dry, but it was fun anyway. So I use it. I still love programming, building software. And so I was working on a piece of software, and I had an agent helping me both write the software, and I asked it to write a test case to make sure the software was working right. And it built a test case, and I double checked it, and it was good. And so I did some more coding, and I said, okay, run the test. Make sure we didn't break something, right? So I'm watching it because you can watch it while it's running. This is for the nerds in there. This is VS Code, and I was using Sonnet. And so I'm watching it go, and all of a sudden I saw it start to change the test. So I stopped it, and I said, "What are you doing?" And it said, "Well, the program came up with a different answer, so I'm changing the test result." So like, wait, no. So I had to. So I have a big list of best practices that I use for Copilot when I'm using it, and so I had to add to that list. Never change the test. Only change the thing that's being tested. And so that was it. So.
Okay, I'm going to take a timeout because you got a ladybug right on your microphone, and it's trying to snuggle up to you. So fly be free. It wants to talk too. Okay, there we go.
There you go. Nice.
So you mentioned something I want to just bring back to truth. Truth. We talked a little bit about that, but this is what scares me about AI, but it also concerns me about us as in the culture. How is truth being impacted by AI and vice versa?
Well, and I'm just going to repeat what I said before. Let's see. Is everybody in this room a Christian? Yeah. You have a superpower, is that the Word of God is the ultimate truth. And so we have an anchor that our non-Christian friends or people that are far from God don't have that anchor. We have the Word of God. And so anything that starts to deviate from the Word of God is not true. And so we have to use that superpower. And so we have to be really careful. The thing is that all of the inventions of man, the evil one gets his grubby mitts on. Right? And he's got his grubby mitts all over the internet. And the internet is deeply involved in that. It's kind of awful. But the internet also is where you can go listen to the latest City of Light song or the latest work from the Gettys, right? It's all this good stuff that comes from the internet. And the same with AI. And so what we need to do is understand it's here. It's coming fast. We need to understand how to use it for good. So we use it for the kingdom, and we use it for things that will support the things that Jesus wants us to do, that he commands us to do in the Word.
So the church has a responsibility to culture and to be the hands and feet of Christ. Does the church have a responsibility when it comes to AI? Is it A, shut it down? Don't use it. Put our heads into the ground. B, watch it explode and see what happens. Or C, something else.
Well, I think the church has personally a responsibility to understand that this thing is coming, and it's coming fast, and we should use it to the maximum advantage for the kingdom. And the more we use it for the kingdom, we fight darkness with light, and the more we shine light with it. I'll give you an example that something that technology is helping with, not just AI but general technology. So E3 is part of a group of IMB and a lot of missionary activities around the world. They call it the Coalition of the Willing because it's a cooperation, and they have a thing called GenMapper, and they map every district in the world about what the state is as far as, is there, like in one district, there may be 2 households of peace. In another district, there may be a beginning church. In another district, there may be groups of small groups. So it helps the missionaries that are working overseas kind of know where things are starting to light up. Like if you look at their GenMap, India is coming alive, and it's in places that haven't been in the past. And so this is an example of technology helping missionaries to work with indigenous pastors in areas where God is working, so we can kind of add fuel to a spark that's already happening. So you see? So
it's that little flame's there now to light it and go. Can I do a rapid fire kind of machine gun approach with you on something? I'm gonna give you one word, and then you just tell me your thoughts on how AI is going to affect that thing. Medical records and cancer research.
How AI? Because, well, the whole medical record world is in desperate need of improvement. Just cancer research, because you said two things.
Well, just medical records then.
So medical records. A good doctor will tell you that one of the most important things that they need in diagnosis is your family history, and your medical history, but also your family history. And so studying genealogy isn't just good for curiosity, it's also actually good for your health. So with AI, we can start finding and collecting things like family history. And the other thing that the AI is good for is, for example, if you're prescribed a drug, what other drugs are you using, and what are the interactions? Your doctor may not know all of the possible interactions between what kind of therapies you might be on. And so AI is a great used properly. Now, be careful about just going to chat and putting in all of your prescriptions. So, but for a doctor, for a medical professional who can spot the errors, it would be very useful.
I've got a friend who had cancer, and he's probably 65, 70 now, and he said, I just dumped all my medical records into AI. Right. And the reason why is because if there's anything that can be done for me at some point in time, I want to know, I want to be able to have it there. So, but you're talking about potentially having family records in there, maybe in an enclosed place that you might be able to access, and the doctor might be able to access their records and use it to mix together is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, and I think that would happen. I think if you want to keep your family genealogy on ChatGPT, that's fine. I mean, it's out there, it's public data. But what your friend, I think, man, this gets into a whole field that's. I don't know if you know Dr. Michael Williams. He's of the UNT Center.
Yes.
So he was the president of Health Science Center. Now he's the chancellor. So he has an MD and a DO. And an MBA from Rice. So he's kind of a smart guy. And he said the biggest issue that people need to understand is with any kind of serious diagnosis, you need a second opinion. And the unwillingness of people to do a second opinion is often a cause of harm. Because doctors, he says this, doctors know less about what they do than you know about what you do. The human body is miraculously complicated. And so if loading things into ChatGPT makes you ask your doctor deeper questions or ask for a second opinion, then that's super helpful, right? If it'll give you the confidence. Now, I know doctors hate the internet already because, you show up and say, well, I Googled this place on my elbow and it says I've got...
So are you talking about me now?
No.
That's not good.
No, I've had several friends that are doctors, and they're like, "Oh, Google."
Okay, banking. How does artificial intelligence, any of that, affect banking at all?
Yeah, banking is an industry, and this. Banking is full of jobs that are tedious, and they're repetitious, and they. Every bank has just tons of jobs that they do it because they've always done it that way. And AI AI is going to change workflow everywhere, but I think in banking particularly, jobs are going to change.
How about lawyers? Because we're really worried.
Well,
should we?
Paralegals should be worried because AI can do a great job of paralegal work.
How about presidents of universities? How's that going to work for us?
Man, they are rock solid.
I don't seem to believe you, but I like that answer. The last question I want to ask you about specifically is about the morality of what's out there right now in AI. It's being fed a lot of stuff. You said there's a lot of junk out there that it's learning from. But you talked about this with the students and the inspiration, creativity piece, what it does have and what it doesn't have. Can you share a little bit of that?
Sure. Yeah. So you are all spirit beings. We're all spirit beings. And AI is a machine. So AI can never be inspired. You're actually directed to be inspired. We're to go to the Lord. We're to ask the Holy Spirit lives in us. And many of us have a hard time dealing with that all the time or really accepting it all the time, but it's true. And so inspiration is a real thing that's available to all of us. And we kind of owe it to our Lord to listen, right? And so AI becomes a tool to help us unlock our inspiration. But we should never mistake it for being inspired, even though it pretends like it is. It's not, and never can be.
That's good. Okay, I've asked a lot of questions because I've got a lot of questions, but I know there's some folks that have questions out here. Do you mind if we take a little bit of time and let them ask? Okay, I'm going to get up and walk around, and if you have a question, just kind of wave at me or yell at me or trip me or something, okay? Because I want to hear from y'all as well. And by the way, yes, I am jumping off the stage. I was going to crowd surf, but he didn't catch me. Questions? Right back there. I'm going to bring this back as fast as I can and get this to you. I feel like Phil Donahue. Don't you feel like Phil Donahue?
Thank you, sir. So AI is doing a lot of different things. It's making videos, it's making music, it's making artwork. Do you think we're going to lose a little bit of our humanity if we're relying on this stuff to make new creations of art or whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question. Have you ever heard a song written by AI? So it's well as I said, I even had to write speech for this morning, and it's pretty dull, and I'm sure it will get better because it mimics more people. So you can say write a song in the style of Rich Mullins. And what you'll end up with is a bunch of Rich Mullins lyrics glued together in ways. But there's not that spark. There's not that inspiration. So for example, think of the song for a moment, "It Is Well With My Soul." Is there anybody in here that song doesn't? Now, there may be some young enough that you don't know the song, but it's an inspired song. And that's what we want to reach for. Now, there's a lot of music and there's a lot of movies and there's a lot of creative work that's so bad and so uninspired that the AI is just going to knock that stuff out. But the true inspiration, the true, and again, I think of the Gettys, if you're familiar with the Gettys, the true inspired art will never be surpassed by AI.
Anybody else? Okay, yes, real quick.
Yeah, maybe it's just my background, but when I think about AI, I worry about our national defense, our financial markets. Whoever has the best AI is going to win the war. Is that really the race? I mean, whoever has the best AI is going to be able to infiltrate the other person's computers and crash their economies. And is that where the new Cold War is?
Yes. So, no, that's a real concern. It's interesting that notice that the terrible war between Ukraine and Russia did not really start having an effect until they started attacking each other's infrastructure. When they started attacking each other's electrical systems, then all of a sudden it got their attention, right? And we are so dependent. Specialization has brought us greatness as far as we can do things that couldn't even be dreamed of 100 years ago because of specialization. But specialization comes on the back of interdependence that's done through infrastructure. And so we have to protect our infrastructure in order to protect our way of life. And I'm not sure. I think I read that the average city in the United States has 3 days of food in it. So if we can't get food into a city within 3 days, things go bad, right? So we have to pay attention to this. It's a good, hopefully not too spooky. The good news is, I read the end of the book. We win. So again, a superpower we have is that our identity is in Christ, and so even if civilization falls, which it will, the Byzantine Empire, one of the greatest empires ever in the history of the world, fell, right? And we may one day, but we will always have Christ, and that's our anchor.
That's good. All right.
Hi. So I just had a question. Do you have like a list of guidelines or like best tips for using AI to get the best out of it, since it's not really thinking, you're just putting information? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I wish I did. There's several that are kind of on the internet that, here's 20 tools you should use. I started just using it back a few years ago. Well, actually, we used it a long time ago at Bass. We used what are called neural nets, and now we use graph neural nets for some of our work at Texas Quantitative, mostly for the financial stuff. So, but a lot of it is just kind of using it and getting comfortable with it. If we and this doesn't, I don't mean to sound, prudish, but we always have to remind ourselves whose we are. And we have to remember, like if we're using, for example, Grok, which is X's version, if you're using Grok to do some graphic kind of creativity, it might present some stuff that's kind of spicy. And you might not want to see the result. And so you have to just keep in mind that. Now I do sometimes, like I have a project in ChatGPT that I said, you are a blend of, and I used Eugene Peterson, Francis Chow, and R.C. Sproul. And so I ask it questions. I added Tim Mackey to it recently, but and so you can say you can give it a system prompt and say you are like this, and that will keep it often away from some of the more sketchy kinds of things. So, but I wish I did. I just don't, nothing other than use it. Don't be afraid of it. Just be ready to. So.
You referenced this spark in terms of creativity, but the spark in terms of connection. We have this epidemic of isolation and depression and anxiety, social media not helping, creating divisions. And there's been some real work especially around memory care, of beings with a spark of a soul in them, making a real connection with an AI chatbot for positive gains. And I don't necessarily like the fact that we're substituting that kind of connection, and yet there's some good coming out of that. So that kind of spark, the spark of connection between a being that is lifeless and a being that has the image of God, how does that play out in the future in terms of meeting the need for connection and the path towards isolation and depression that we've been kind of seeing humanity go towards?
That is a great question. And it's a topic that we have to dig deep into that. Because one thing is that AI will always say things like you'll ask it a question, you'll say, wow, that's a great question, Dowell. You could ask it things like, just anything silly, and it'll say, that's a great question. It's always reaffirming. And the more you ask it, the more it affirms you, like, oh yeah, you're so smart, you're clever. And so it can lead you to think that you've got a relationship with this thing, but you don't. Right. It's, I mentioned this morning that I got in a music thing with an AI, and it was completely wrong. And I told it was wrong, and it spent literally 30 pages of trying to prove it was right. And it finally said, I'm broken. And I literally felt sorry for it. No. why would I feel sorry for a machine? And so I said, oh no, here's the answer. And it said, oh, thank you for the lifeline. So the natural language processor pretends like it's a human, and it's pretty good at it, but it's not a human, right? And so I think one advantage I have is I've got a pretty, between our kids and grandkids and my church family and my Christian friends network, I have a pretty good real world network. The concern though is we've got so many, especially younger people, who are, their network is virtual. And World Magazine, if you're familiar with World Magazine, they did a special podcast called Tech Exit. And it was, and the idea of exiting tech. And they were interviewing I think it was a psychiatry professor out of Berkeley, I believe. You can see it. They were saying there's actually physical damage that spending too much time on screens causes to children. The folds in the brain don't develop as deep, and we need that surface space. And so there's a real epidemic of this kind of lack of connection, and God made us to be connected beings with one another. You know, He formed us to be together. And we saw some of this with the, not to get controversial here, but with some of the COVID isolation. And I don't know if you guys isolated here in Abilene or not, but we're
not scared of anything in West Texas.
Well,
we ain't scared of no COVID.
There's a little town near us. We live south of Fort Worth, and there's a little town named Godley that's near us. Man, they didn't do anything. It was just, so we just went to Godley and went out to eat and had, but with a lot of people that did, and the masking, there's a connection that happens when you see someone else's face. For one thing, it creates, I don't know if there's medical folks in here, you can correct me, but I think it's, so when you have joy, it creates endorphins, but you have to have this other oxytocin that goes with it. And facial connection is a big source of oxytocin. So when you cover the face, it lacks that. So obviously when you're on Instagram or one of these other kind of virtual connection machines, there's only a part of the communication that's happening. There's only part of the actual communion between humans. So somehow, and I'm not exactly sure how. I know there's some school districts now that have banned screens from their schools, which I think I'm totally in favor of. It's a challenge we haven't figured out how to meet yet, I think, but we have to.
One more question, anybody? If not, I have the last question. You got one? Okay. Saturn and music. Will you tell them about that?
Well, that was we're doing a series at our church that's kind of faith in work, and we had a scientist from Lockheed who does he actually programs quantum computers for Lockheed, which is, man, that's a whole. It's very cool, but anyway, so he did one, and in his talk, he was talking about how God puts his fingerprints in everything. And one of them is that there's a resonance that happens within the rings of Saturn that are the same frequencies as our, what we call Western tuning, the notes that we use in our music. And I thought, really? That's just like God.
He's showing off again.
He does show off. It's great, isn't it?
Well, let me say this much. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for what you shared and your life. Rebecca, thanks for coming in and being a part of this too.